under the Tuscan moon. The vineyard stretched out like an emerald sea under the golden hues of the Tuscan sun. Dominic Kane stood at the edge of his estate, the earthy aroma of ripe grapes filling the air. The land was his sanctuary and his burden. A sprawling vineyard passed down through generations of Kanes, steeped in tradition and shadowed by family secrets. At 38, Dominic was a man of quiet intensity, his dark eyes carrying the weight of a past he rarely spoke about. He was known throughout Tuscany as a master vintner, his wines capturing the essence of the region. Yet behind his stoic demeanor lay a man haunted by guilt and loss. Dominic had once dreamed of escaping the confines of the vineyard, of pursuing a life free of the expectations his family had placed upon him. But those dreams had died with his father, leaving him tethered to the land and the promise he had made to preserve its legacy. The arrival of Isabelle Moreau disrupted the steady rhythm of his life. She was a celebrated sommelier from Paris, her reputation for discerning the soul of a wine earning her invitations to the most exclusive vineyards in the world. Dominic had reluctantly agreed to host her at the urging of his sister, Elena, who believed Isabelle's review could elevate their wines to international acclaim. From the moment Isabelle stepped onto the estate, Dominic was captivated. She was a whirlwind of energy and curiosity, her auburn hair catching the light as she moved with effortless grace. Her laughter filled the air, a stark contrast to the solemn quiet that usually enveloped him. "Mr. Kane," she said, extending a hand with a warm smile. "Thank you for having me." "Dominic," he replied, his deep voice carrying a hint of reservation. Their interactions were initially formal, marked by Isabelle's probing questions about the vineyard's history and Dominic's guarded responses. But over the course of her stay, the walls between them began to crumble. Isabelle was unlike anyone Dominic had ever met. She had an uncanny ability to see beyond the surface, to draw out the stories hidden in the wine and the man who made it. "You're not just making wine, Dominic," she said one evening as they walked through the vineyard under a canopy of stars. "You're telling a story of love, loss, and resilience." Her words struck a chord in him, awakening feelings he had long buried. The first spark between them ignited during a late-night tasting session in the cellar. Dominic had prepared a selection of his finest vintages, each bottle representing a piece of his family's legacy. As Isabelle sampled the wines, her eyes lit up with delight. "This one," she said, holding up a glass of ruby-red Merlot. "It tastes like..." "Longing?" Dominic raised an eyebrow. "Longing?" She nodded. "There's a depth to it, a quiet ache that lingers. It's beautiful." He couldn't help but smile at her poetic interpretation. "You see more in a glass of wine than most people see in a lifetime." "That's because wine is more than a drink," Isabelle replied. "It's a connection to the land, to the people who create it, to the moments it accompanies." Their eyes met, and for the first time in years, Dominic felt something stir within him, a longing not for escape, but for connection. As their bond deepened, Dominic found himself opening up to Isabelle in ways he hadn't with anyone else. He told her about his father's sudden passing, the weight of responsibility that had fallen on his shoulders, and the strained relationship with his brother, Marco, who had left the vineyard years ago in pursuit of his own dreams. Isabelle listened with compassion, her presence a balm to his weary soul. In her, Dominic found a kindred spirit, a woman who understood the complexities of passion and duty. But their growing closeness wasn't without its challenges. One afternoon, while walking through the vineyard, Dominic and Isabelle stumbled upon a group of workers arguing. The dispute centered around a section of the land that had been damaged by a recent storm. "This will take weeks to fix," one of the workers said, frustration evident in his tone. Dominic's temper flared. The vineyard was already facing financial strain, and the prospect of further setbacks was almost too much to bear. "This is unacceptable," he snapped. "We can't afford delays." Isabelle placed a hand on his arm, her touch grounding him. "Dominic," she said softly, You don't have to carry this burden alone. Her words struck a nerve. What would you know about it? He retorted, his voice harsher than he intended. Isabel recoiled, hurt flashing across her face. Without another word, she turned and walked away, leaving Dominic to wrestle with the guilt of his outburst. That evening, Dominic found her in the cellar, a glass of wine in hand. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice heavy with remorse. "I didn't mean to take it out on you." Isabel looked at him, her eyes filled with both pain and understanding. "I know this vineyard means everything to you, Dominic, but you can't let it consume you. You deserve more than just survival. You deserve to live." Her words lingered in his mind, challenging the narrative he had clung to for so long. The turning point came during an impromptu trip to a nearby hilltop that Isabel insisted on visiting. She had heard of a secluded spot with breathtaking views and was determined to see it before she left. Reluctantly, Dominic agreed, driving her up the winding roads as the sun dipped below the horizon. When they reached the summit, the view was indeed spectacular. A sea of vineyards bathed in the soft glow of moonlight. But their moment of tranquility was interrupted by a sudden commotion. A wild boar, startled by their presence, charged toward them with alarming speed. Instinct took over as Dominic stepped in front of Isabel, his body shielding hers. He grabbed a nearby branch and swung it with all his strength, driving the animal back into the forest. The danger passed as quickly as it had come, leaving them both breathless. You saved me," Isabel said, her voice trembling. Dominic turned to her, his hands still shaking. "I couldn't let anything happen to you." In that moment, under the Tuscan moon, the walls around his heart crumbled completely. Their return to the vineyard was filled with unspoken emotion. That night, as they stood in the courtyard, Dominic finally gave voice to the feelings he had kept hidden. "Isabel," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you've changed everything for me. I've spent so long burying myself in this vineyard, convincing myself it was all I needed. But you've shown me there's more to life, more to love." She stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. "Dominic, you've given me a home I didn't know I was searching for. I don't want to leave. Not without you." Their kiss was a culmination of every shared glance, every moment of vulnerability. Over the weeks that followed, Dominic and Isabel worked together to restore the damaged section of the vineyard. With her encouragement, he reached out to Marco, inviting him back to the estate. To Dominic's surprise, his brother accepted, bringing with him a renewed sense of hope for their family's future. Isabel stayed, her presence transforming the vineyard into a place of joy and possibility. Under the Tuscan moon, their love flourished, proving that even the deepest roots could grow toward the light. The end.